Hello and welcome to church. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start off with some worship. I'm just going to pray for us before we do that. Lord, we just want to welcome you into this space. We know that you're here already, and we just ask that God, we feel your presence. In this moment of worship, in this moment of church, God, we just ask that you give us ears to hear and eyes to see you moving. God, we're so thankful for the good things that are happening in our world, but we're also so aware of the bad. And we just want to keep praying into that, praying blessing over our world, over our people, and over our congregations that exist. God, we lift up this moment to you in praise and declaration of who you are. You are so good to us, and we just want to lift that up. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
You have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, and I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. Darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, and I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after me. My life laid down, surrendered now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. My life laid down, surrendered now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, and I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good, yeah. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. My life laid down and surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. For your arms are open wide. Grace takes me back again. You always take me back. There's mercy in your eyes. Thank you, Lord, for loving me. Nothing like your love. Your arms are open wide. Grace takes me back again. You always take me back. There's mercy in your eyes. Thank you, Lord, for loving me. There's nothing like your love. I'm running into your arms of grace with no reason to hide away. It's not the first time I've been in this place. I'm coming home again. I'm welcomed home again. I'm running into your arms of grace with no reason to hide away. It's not the first time I've been in this place. I'm coming home again. I'm welcomed home again. For your arms are open wide. Grace takes me back again. You always take me back. There's mercy in your eyes. Thank you, Lord, for loving me. There's nothing like your love. Your arms are open wide. Grace takes me back again. You always take me back. There's mercy in your eyes. Thank you, Lord, for loving me. There's nothing like your love. Your arms are open wide. Grace takes me back again. You always take me back. There's mercy in your eyes. And thank you, Lord, for loving me. There's nothing like your love. I'm running into your arms of grace with no reason to hide away. It's not the first time I've been in this place. I'm coming home again. I'm welcomed home again. Unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again to your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. And I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and say, I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and say, I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and say, I am a child of God. Yes, I am. I am the child of God. Yes, we are. I am the child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Oh, I'm no longer a slave to fear. 'Cause I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Oh, I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Hi guys, my name's Sarah Raft and I have the privilege of sharing communion with you today. I've been coming to this church for a little while now and my two young boys are in twinkles and are missing it like crazy. Today I wanted to share with you a little bit, but I wanted to point out, some of you may not realise, Usain Bolt just announced the name of his baby girl. Usain Bolt already has a prophetic name. It's so cool. Fastest man alive, and his surname's Bolt. He went next level with his daughter's name. He's an Olympian, he's a gold medalist, he's a world record holder, he is phenomenal. And he named his little girl Olympia Lightning Bolt. You can't get cooler than that. You can't pull it off in most circumstances, but he's managed to in this one. He must be so proud of his little girl. He must be head over heels in love. I can say that confidently, even though I do not know the man. I don't think anyone would disagree with me. He is a proud father who is so in love. with a baby who's done absolutely nothing. She wouldn't be considered useful at the moment. Yet he would be so proud and so in love. So often we attribute our value, our usefulness, to what we do. We love serving God. We love being used by him. We want to minister to other people. We want to help them. We want to make a difference in our world, and that's righteous. But it's not where our value comes from. Our value purely comes from him loving us. I used to think that my value came from the fact that I loved him. I was a Christian. I love God, therefore I'm worthy. My value is nothing to do with me. It's him loving me that gives me any value at all. At this time, with COVID and everything going on, we can't necessarily do the things, the work, the actions that maybe have made us feel worthwhile in some circumstances, and yet our value has nothing to do with that. So we can just rest in it. When it comes to communion, there are two parts. So we have the bread. In Luke 12, Jesus said, when he took the bread, he said, "This is my body, which was given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." So when we take the bread, we can remember this is all about him. This is an outrageous way of being loved, and God chose a way that as humans will go, "What? That's your son? That's how much you love me?" Jamie shared last week about our thoughts having such power and what we meditate on having such power. Let's meditate on the fact that God sent his son Jesus. His body was given for us. He loved us that much. Let's take the bread. The cup, the wine, it signified a new covenant, a new way of doing things. When prior it was about sacrifices that we would make, that people would do, actions, keeping things right. And God's like, "Nah, I got this covered." And Jesus said, "This cup is my blood of the new covenant that I make with you." He's done it all. He is so good. Let's take this wine. And as we drink it, let's remember and have our minds linger and think about the fact that we are living under a new way, and it's all Jesus. It's all God. Let's drink the cup. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that it is all you're doing. It's nothing to do with us. You love us, whatever stage we're in. You love us whether we're feeling useful or feeling valuable. We are valuable because you love us. And for that we are so very thankful. Be glorified in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
So for story time this morning, we've come down to Food and Life. And we're going to just interview some of our volunteers. So I've got with me first off Di. I'm going to ask her a couple of questions and just see what her answers are. So this is Di.
Hello.
So Di, how long have you been with Food and Life, volunteering at Food and Life?
9 years. Round about there, 9 years.
So Di is actually one of our original volunteers and has been in Food and Life since it's first commenced. So what would you say is what do you enjoy about volunteering in the shop?
Meeting people, meeting new people, helping the community, and it's a great place to work with everybody.
And is there anything else that you would like to just add in relation to the shop or the church as a whole, community care as a whole, just in general?
No, I just think what the church and that are doing here is fantastic. really fantastic. You know, and people appreciate what we're doing for them. You know, they even say, you know, volunteers, how do you do it? Well, it's just a matter of you enjoy doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you doing it because we wouldn't be here without it.
No, of course not.
So we have a couple of other volunteers as well who have kindly agreed to be on camera because we all love it so much. We have George with us. So George,
Hello.
how long have you been volunteering in
Around-
Food and Life?
Around 5 years.
And what do you enjoy about the volunteering?
I enjoy serving people and make people happy, because when I see the people happy, that makes me happy myself.
Right. And so is there anything else that you would like to add about Food and Life or community care or just...
I feel like hopefully that business growing up and helping more people in other ways.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we have Cess. So Cess, how long have you been with us now?
About 4 years.
So Cess has been volunteering with us for about 4 years. Cess actually started off volunteering with our Christmas hampers, didn't you?
Christmas hampers, yeah.
And then came into the shop in the last 18 months or so.
2 years, 4 years.
On the actual roster.
Oh,
About-
okay, yeah, okay. We won't argue
officially,
with that. Okay,
officially.
officially, yes.
Unofficially maybe a little bit longer, but officially,
Yes, for true, yes.
So what do you enjoy? What have you found? So what is something that really you enjoy and something that surprised you about volunteering in a good way?
Well, as everybody said, all the volunteers are saying, meeting all the beautiful people that come in the shop, helping them out when it's necessary, you know, and it's a good thing for the community. The church does a lot for everybody, helps out tremendous. And the shop itself has changed over the last few years, and especially the new one next door. That's come out marvellous. It's very, very, very good. And it's good working with everybody. I love it.
Well, we enjoy having you all here, so it's just good to be able to say we really do appreciate everything you guys do for us because we literally wouldn't be here without it. So
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So here we are in Renew, or the newly styled Renew. We thought it'd be a good idea to just show what you can actually purchase in Renew. So I am in a dress that everybody can purchase in Renew at the moment, and it is actually brand new. We would suggest that you come on down whenever you get a chance to have a look at what our refurbished shop looks like. But with me I have Lorraine, who's one of our volunteers. How long have you been in Renew now?
About 9 months.
And what would you say you enjoy about volunteering? What has surprised you in relation to volunteering?
The variety of people, and I just love coming here. All sorts of nice people. You get ones that aren't so nice, but majority are lovely.
So, there you have it. Come on down.
Hi everyone, it's Anne here, and I'm in the parent room today videoing, ready for today's service. And I wanted to be here because I especially wanted to be in front of these 3 signs, pictures that we talk about a lot in Twinkles and sometimes in All Stars, and they say God made me, God loves me, and Jesus wants to be my friend forever. And in communion today, Sarah, you would have just heard her talking about how our value and our worth doesn't come because of the things that we do. It comes because God made us and he loves us and he wants to be our friend. And we know that because he died on the cross. He showed it to us, that love, when he died on the cross. And today Steve's going to preach, and he's going to be talking about grace. And grace is a beautiful word. And it's a beautiful word because it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful action. God is gracious to us. That means that he doesn't make us live what we deserve. He took our punishment, and instead he gives us forgiveness, he gives us love, he gives us kindness, and he gives us heaps of really great things that help us live the best way. Not because we deserve them, but because he made us and he loves us and he wants to be our friend. And so we're going to watch a video today that's all about grace. And it's grace in two ways. One is that you'll see people being really ungracious to someone and someone being really ungracious back. And you'll also see how gracious that Jesus is. So we're going to watch a story about Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus was a man who'd done a lot of wrong things. And the people in his community didn't like him very much at all. And in the video you'll see that they're actually quite mean to him because he's been mean to them. But Jesus is so kind. He is so loving, and he really values Zacchaeus. And he shows that by talking to him and having dinner with him and just being a part of his life and offering him forgiveness and friendship. And that's what he does for us too. And Steve's going to talk about another really great story that we know, about the wise and the foolish builders and choosing to build our life on the rock. Because God made us and he loves us and he wants to be our friend forever. And he is so gracious to us, and we can share that grace with our world, the people that we know and love and the people that we meet. And so that's what we're going to be thinking about and praying about today. So enjoy this video about Zacchaeus and check out how gracious Jesus is to him and how kind and forgiving and what a difference that makes to Zacchaeus. Cool, thanks everyone.
Stories of the Bible. Zacchaeus. This is Zacchaeus.
Hey there.
Who was a tax collector and very rich. Tax collectors were hated because many people thought they were liars and cheaters.
Boo.
Zacchaeus lived in Jericho, and one day, Jesus was passing through Jericho.
What's going on?
Jesus is here! Woohoo!
Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was.
Hey, excuse me. Hey, watch where you're going.
But he was too short to see above the crowd.
Oh, that's it.
So he ran ahead to a place where he knew Jesus would come. He climbed to a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and saw Zacchaeus in the tree.
Oh, hey there, friend. Who? Me? Yeah, you.
He said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I must stay at your house today.
Oh, all right.
Zacchaeus came down quickly. He was pleased to have Jesus in his house. All the people saw this and began to complain.
Ugh.
Look at the kind of man Jesus stays with. Zacchaeus is a sinner. But Zacchaeus said to Jesus, I will give half my money to the poor. If I have cheated anyone, I will pay that person back 4 times more. Jesus said, Salvation has come to this house today.
What?
This man truly belongs to the family of Abraham. The Son of Man came to find lost people and save them.
Well, hello, my name is Grant. I just wanted to bring an update in regard to where we're up to as far as face-to-face church. Well, the exciting news is that 2 weeks from now, on the 26th of July, we will be having services together back in the building, which is such good news. So on the 26th of July, 10 a.m. and 6:30 p.m, there will be face-to-face church services happening. But as you can see, we've set up the church. It certainly won't look like this because we're not all sitting individually. We'll be sitting with our family groups or our partners, those in the same household. So it won't quite look like this, but it's given us an idea of how many people we can fit in the auditorium, and that will then influence about how many can actually attend church as well. So we're looking at a booking platform at the moment because people will have to book to come to church because we'll need to capture personal information like a mobile number and the names of people attending, and that's according to the government requirements. But we'll also hopefully being in a position to get as many people at church each week as possible, hopefully getting the majority of people being able to get to face-to-face church at least once every 2 weeks, which will be really exciting as well. Each of the different spaces around the church will also have these cleaning packs set up. So there's been a whole lot of things we've had to put in place to prepare, not only to do face-to-face church, but to do the different ministries around the church. So these are set up in each room for each leader or each person that is last to leave, just to be able to clean things properly. But most of the leaders have been trained and are aware of the importance of doing this to keep things nice and clean for everyone else. Encourage you to do the survey that has been sent out as well. This is helping us gather important information that will help us as we move towards the reopening of all of the different ministries that we have here at Padstow Baptist Church. And please continue to pray. We're really excited about opening, but more importantly, we want to do what is aligned to the things on God's heart for us. So as a church community, even though face-to-face church ministry is something that we want to do, we also want to be aligned to the things that are on God's heart for us. So have a great week, everyone, and looking forward to seeing you face-to-face in 2 weeks from now. Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome to Sunday Church. It's lovely to be here with you all. I'm Lisa and one of the elders of the church and the administrator. Just to let you know our announcements for this week. We wanted to say happy birthday to the people in our community having a birthday this week. So happy birthday to you guys. If you are having a birthday and I don't know about it, please feel free to let me know so that we can share that happiness with you as well. Just a reminder that our community care winter appeal is still on. It is still winter. It was 8 degrees maximum in Canberra when I was there this week. It is a difficult time for people in our community. So if you have resources to help out, this is an option, and the link will be in the email that I send out after the service today. SRE, scripture teaching in schools, is happening from term 3, coming up very soon. A lot of our current scripture teachers fall into the vulnerable category and aren't feeling safe to return to their scripture teaching at the moment. So we're looking for some more people to be part of that. We've got a short clip that we'll watch.
The message of the gospel is taken to children and young people in public schools every week. It's a message of love, service, and hope for them and their families, especially in difficult times.
Our friends in all churches are almost ready for special religious education to resume next term. Some volunteers who teach these classes are unable to return because of the risk to their health at this time. So we're asking if you will fill in as a relief SRE teacher for a while so that these students don't miss out.
Be there for me.
Will you be there for Jones?
My friends and I have been teaching for many years. Right now we need a break at this time. Be there for me.
Will you be there for Dorothy?
Be there for me.
Will you be there for Darcy?
There are pre-prepared lessons ready for you to use in the classroom. They are a simple and effective way to bring the gospel to the kids in your local schools.
Be there for me.
If you want to be there for them, just contact your church or parish and ask about Relief SRE teaching.
So if you can help out with scripture teaching, please let me know. I have more information that I can tell you about that. We are continuing our services online for the moment, and you will have heard from Grant that we are working towards coming back to church face-to-face, which will be very exciting. But just for the moment, we are continuing online. There has been a survey. Thank you to those people who've participated in that. Your feedback has been really appreciated and valuable. If you haven't completed that survey, it's not too late, and the link will go out in the emails as well. We are working towards coming back on the 26th of July, which is only 2 weeks away. So there's going to be a lot of information coming to you about what will happen and what to do. So please look out for that. But we will be continuing our services online after the 26th of July as well if you're unable to attend our services, and please, if you are unwell, don't come to church. The online service will still be available even when face-to-face church happens again. Just a reminder about our options to give to the Lord and the work of his ministry. So you can give by direct deposit into the bank through your own bank on internet banking. You can drop in your offerings to the shops during the week. We can come and pick up your offerings if that is something helpful for you. And we have the direct text to give option. Don't dial. Press these numbers, text the numbers and the word give, and follow those prompts. So thank you everyone for your generous support of the church at this time. So let's just pray together. Lord God, we want to thank you that you are with us, that you are active in our world. We want to thank you that you see us, that you love us. We want to thank you just for your power in reaching down into this world and meeting with us. We want to offer our gifts to you as an acknowledgement of our love and our trust in you. We want to be people who represent you and who change the world around us because you are in us and you do that. So as we give our gifts, we give ourselves, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Matthew 7, verses 13 to 27. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are fierce wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the stream rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundations on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the stream rose, and the winds blew it, and it beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash.
Hello, church. Just to introduce myself once again, my name's Steve McGill. I'm a member here at the church. I have family. I work in the luxurious world of retail, and I'm also a master's student in theology, particularly historical theology. So I study old people or dead people talking about big theological concepts. And today I'm looking forward to just talking to you about a topic that I've been thinking about, this idea of where I put the foundation of my life. Before we get there, I want you to remember back to a time, it was Christmas this year, it was just past. And it's a weird concept because it seems so long ago. During the holidays, the Christmas holidays, I decided that I would learn to become a marriage celebrant, which was a silly idea at the busiest time of year for where I work. But part of this whole celebrancy gig is to actually not just do weddings. It's actually a whole list of things. You can do naming ceremonies and vow renewals, and even do funerals. In fact, you can do pet funerals, which I didn't even know was a thing. And one of the assignments we had was this we had to come up with this list of resources that we could offer to our clients to use at each of these occasions. And I must admit that some of them were a bit strange. Like, what do you put at a pet funeral? I'm not sure. What do you do at a vow renewal? What do you do in a naming ceremony? And you had this master list of resources. I found myself when I started this idea of my own funeral that I was planning a little bit. Like, what songs would I want at my own funeral? And there's not actually that many great songs to have at a funeral. In fact, the one that keeps coming up over and over again is Frank Sinatra's My Way. Now, if you don't know who Frank Sinatra is, I want you to imagine a singer with a bit of a gangster vibe to them. They have this buttery, smooth voice. He actually had piercing blue eyes, so much so that he became known as Old Blue Eyes. Now, this song, I won't sing it to you because that would be a terrible thing for everyone involved, has these great lyrics, and I just want to read some of them. It says, "Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step on the byway, and much more than this, I did it my way." This is the bridge, I love this. "Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew, but through it all, where there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all and I stood tall and did it my way." It's this brilliant song. Like, it's one of these songs that's like old school, charge you up type thing. And if you lived a life where you kicked butt and took names, like, that's the kind of song it is. It's cocky and self-assured. If you could own that song for your life, not just for show, I stood tall against everything that life threw at me. It's a pretty, it's a great way to kind of finish out your life with that song. But it's also super selfish. Like, I did it my way, not anyone else's. I stood tall. No one helped me. And now that I've done all that, my life is complete and I can do it. It's kind of a really short-sighted way of seeing life. And as a Christian, while you might go, that's a great song, it's not exactly the way you'd want to be known for your life. In fact, if there was a song that I could pick for my funeral, it's a song it's called "If I Stand" by Rich Mullins. Now, Rich Mullins was a Christian singer, quite famous during the 80s and early 90s, and he actually wrote a number of songs for other people like Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith and all these names that are kind of the fathers of Christian music now. And he wrote this song that says this: "So if I stand, let me stand on the promise that you will pull me through. And if I can't, let me fall on the grace that first brought me to you. And if I sing, let me sing for the joy that has born in me these songs. And if I weep, let it be as a man who is longing for his home." Doesn't that sum up the Christian life? That somehow we get to the end of it all and we didn't just stand firm because we were strong, but or because of our actions, but because we stood on the grace of God, the foundation of our lives. Today, I want to ask this question of, do we stand on the grace and mercy of God? Is it the thing that props us up in life? But there's another way of asking this question about how we regard grace in our life. And I want to look at the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German pastor who was part of the Confessing Church in Nazi Germany. And what he did was resist the Nazi party and then the Nazi government. He eventually ended up in a concentration camp for his part in the conspiracy to assassinate Hitler. So he lives this amazing kind of complicated life of standing tall for the grace of God. But he asked this question 10 years after Nazi occupation. So basically for 10 years, the Nazis have ruled Germany and now parts of Europe. And he asked this question. He says, "Who stands firm? Only the one whose ultimate standard is not his reason, his principles, conscience, freedom, or virtue. Only the one who is prepared to sacrifice all of these when in faith and in relationship to God alone. He's called to be obedient and obedient and responsible action. Such a person is the responsible one, whose life is to be nothing but a response to God's question and call. Where are these responsible ones? So not only do we need to ask the question of, do we stand by grace? But also, as Bonhoeffer would put it, do we stand for grace in the world? Are we people who propel God's mercy and grace into the world? Is that the foundation of our lives as well? And it's one of those questions that when we start planning our funeral, we might go, this is kind of a really relevant question for the end of our lives. Like, have we done enough to get us through the doors of heaven? But we need to go that step further and say, how do we stand firm in this life with God? And how does Jesus affect my life actions? Am I simply just a ticket holder for the afterlife? Have I paid my way, or has God paid my way? Or am I a kingdom of God follower? Am I a disciple of Jesus? Now, here, acting in the world. Am I an agent of grace, or simply just someone who received it once upon a time? I want to suggest that in our days of being locked out and being separated and having further restrictions, we get to ask these questions of what exactly do we stand on? Like, what do we stand on? And what exactly do we stand for? So I want to thank Daniel for doing the readings today. And I just appreciate him for taking that time to read out. So what we have today in our passages is 4 images from the Sermon of the Mount, the last chapter of the Sermon of the Mount in Matthew. They all present a way of God assessing a life, particularly our lives. And I just want to look a little bit on the 3 choices before we focus in on those last ones. The first 3 passages present us like some sort of judgment criteria, the width of a path, or the gate that we choose to enter. Then there's this second image of a fruit that is shown that comes from prophets. And finally, this question of the depth of actions by disciples of Jesus. Each passage sorts out these groups into a further smaller group too. So some walk the path of life, while others walk the path that leads to destruction. We get this question of whether a prophet has good fruit or bad fruit, and while the passage never really explains what that is, we know that a tree or a prophet that bears good fruit is allowed to grow. People are allowed to share in it, where a tree that bears bad fruit is thrown into the fire, like a prophet would be. And we get this image of heaven and hell there. And then there's this disciple. There are those who are prophesied, who cast out demons, but they're still not admitted to the kingdom of heaven. There's something about them. So there's true disciples, and then there's these people who act the part, but somehow don't make the part. And if you wanted to use it as an image, we have this idea of God panning for gold. He's sifting through dirt and muck, looking for something of value, and in each of these 3 things, he points them out. But it's important not to simply just read these passages as purely about our afterlife. The idea of heaven and hell, for example, and all those things that go around it, was a developing concept in Jesus' day. Now, if you spend some time looking through the Old Testament at the idea of heaven and hell, it's actually not that clear about what it's talking about. There's a place of death, and there's all these kind of other ideas that we don't see when we conventionally talk about heaven and hell. So when Jesus has a conversation about heaven and hell and judgment and assessing people's life, he's actually looking to introduce people to his ideas on the afterlife, on heaven and hell. And if you ever want to see him get into a debate about this, later in the Bible there's a story about resurrection and this idea of who gets to marry which wife or which husband. It's all very confusing, and it's meant to be because it's this debate about how resurrection fits into our afterlife. And that obviously becomes a crucial question as we draw to the final chapters of the Gospel. But he didn't talk about the afterlife so we could be assured of what was to come necessarily, but rather to direct our lives here and now. Yes, we get a sense from Jesus of what eternity might look like and why you might end up there, but he's trying to inform our lives. Now, the final part of our series on the Sermon of the Mount there is this idea of the foolish and the wise builder. Now, just to refresh your memory, I'm going to read from another perspective in Luke 7. So if you've got your Bibles there, or your phones or whatever, just look at Luke 7:47. As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation of rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my word and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete. So the first thing that we can draw from both the Matthew and Luke passage is this idea that floods come. That floods are going to happen in our life. That's just a cold reality of being human. 2020 has been the year of metaphorical floods, in some cases literal ones. From fires to COVID to economic downturn, we get a sense that this is the year of the great flood. And on top of that, even if you haven't been directly affected by it, think about your sense of health, like how your health could be affected, or your financial security, or your mental well-being. And all of that stuff has taken a pretty bad beating this year. And the worst part of it all is, despite having all these big things that we can talk about, is that life has somehow cruelly just continued to move forward. Like it just couldn't take a break. Relationships continue to fall apart. People have gotten sick. People we love have died. It's like 2020 didn't get the note that it needed to just calm itself down a bit. Pain and suffering is cruel and heartbreaking and overwhelming no matter when it happens. And if 2020 is an example, it also has the worst possible sense of timing. And this is one of the truths that I think we struggle to grasp, is that Christianity never was and has never been an exemption card for getting out of life's problems. We are not exempt from being human just because we are a Christian. There are two promises that we know. Is the promise that floods will come in our life. But the other one, the promise of Christianity, is that God is with us. Jesus sent his Spirit to reside within us, and his final words are surely an encouragement to when times of flood come. Surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. The promise of Christianity is that God is with us. Let's move on to this idea, and let's look at the person who decides to build sandcastles, essentially. This idea that somehow the sand and the rock are our points of assessment, the things that Jesus is filtering and mining and panning for the value in. And so we have this foolish man who builds his house on the sand without a strong foundation. Now, in our head, or maybe just in my head, we can imagine that this is some sort of beach bum, a laid-back persona, like nothing could go wrong. Maybe with a hint of a Californian accent, always someone who says turtley. And he built a house here because, the view. No consideration of why to build it there, just the view and the totally tubular waves. That's the kind of person I have in my mind when we describe a foolish person who builds on the sand. Now, if we to literally apply that metaphor to life, we could talk about it in a number of ways. It could be a person who builds his life on the sand is someone who builds their life at the expense of others. They're selfish, they're evil, they're malicious, they're hurtful, and they essentially want to get to the top of the pile of human endeavour and said, this is what it is. People who obsess over money or career or influence or some metric of success, and that's the only driving goal in their life. That's a person who will lose that life in a flood, right? But also, that's the foolish person who builds on the sand. But maybe it's another way. Maybe it's like an ostrich who buries their head in the sand, trying to escape the danger and ignore the outside world. Maybe it's that person who says, oh, if I just hide away and ignore reality, then this will be the case. But ultimately, whatever it is, it's a life that ignores God. Now, it would be easy to say, oh, well, that's just atheists and people outside of the church. But I think it's fair to say that there's a little bit of that selfish builder, that foolish builder in all of us. For seasons of our lives or certain aspects of our lives, God never has a part. We never make him part of the consideration. We build sandcastles throughout our lives. And no matter how elaborate, no how tricky, no how well we've constructed on the sand, floods and storms and winds have no problem knocking them over. This elaborate structure of sand will crumble when floods will come. That's the guarantee. But I think there's another version of this building a house on the sand. And it's this idea that sometimes we like to have a mixed foundation. So if you'll allow me just a little bit of leeway to stretch the metaphor, to stretch the parable. You have this amazing beach. You've been on these amazing beaches before. And all of these great beaches eventually come to a point where they become rock, right? And you go up on, you explore the little rock pools and all that kind of stuff. And if I was to be honest, I think I'm great at building somewhere between the rock and the sand where they kind of meet. A split level house, so to speak, or a mixed foundation home. A little bit of rock, a little bit of sand. But when I'm being really dishonest, is when I present this house as a house that has its foundation on God. So I get out the big rug, whatever that is, and I spread it over the floor, and I call it a Christian home. That Christ is the foundation. And I don't think I'm alone in this, right? We all have this beautiful, big Christian rug that we get out. Usually we get it out when people are watching. So when guests come over, we get the nice rug out to call it Christian. There is a lot that we include in that this big label of Christianity, from our political worldviews to our science, to our music, to our arts, to culture, to acceptable behaviours. We fill our lives into this bubble. We hide it all under the rug and we say, this is what we call Christianity. And how we can tell whether this is truly a Christian foundation is when we look at the God who's in charge of it. So if you say this version of my Christian culture is ruled by a God who looks exactly like me, or is it a God who actually looks like the God of the Bible, who doesn't require loopholes and interpretations and these versions to become our foundation? God is just God. So we pose that question. What truly is the foundation? Is it mixed or is it something else? Now, don't get me wrong. Some of the greatest conversations happen and arguments happen around where the sand and the rock meets, where we kind of look at the boundaries of where the world and Christianity meet. But I have to be honest, I'm not sure if I want to die on the hill of some of my beliefs. One of my great fears about my own personal faith is that it will be exposed. And someone will be like Toto and will pull back the curtain and the wizard will be revealed as just an old man. That someone will see that the emperor actually has no clothes. Sometimes when I fear that when I look at the foundation, when people see the foundation of my faith, that they will pull it back and see that only some of it is of God. And so to avoid that, I think we need to loosen a grip on some of the aspects of our house and acknowledge that a lot of what we call Christian may just be swept away. Now we come to this final understanding that Jesus is talking about, this person who builds on the rock. This is the grand design moment. So after months of investment and those weird conversations and posh voices talking about design choices, we actually have the reveal. And we are simply called to create a solid foundation. The wise person is the person who dug down deep and laid the foundation on the rock. Now, the image of Christ or of God as the rock is one throughout scriptures. Here's just some examples. In Matthew it said, this is Jesus quoting the Old Testament, "Have you never read in the scriptures, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes." The prophet Isaiah said, "So this is what the sovereign Lord says. See, I lay a stone in Zion, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone and a sure foundation. The one who relies on it will never be stricken with panic." And the psalmist says, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is the rock, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold." The image is clear that if we build on the rock, it's reliable. It's a fortress. It's a deliverer. It's a cornerstone. It will stand the test of time. The person who is wise enough to build in that is, according to Jesus, who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice. The person who digs deep into Jesus. And now if we were to kind of sum it up the way Jesus sums it up, at the core of digging deep into Jesus, of hearing and acting in his teaching, is to love God and to love neighbour, right? Like, it doesn't get complicated like that. Now, we could spend a whole other sermon talking about the idea of the wisdom of God and how we should approach it with enthusiasm. If you have a few moments in the week, look over the opening chapters of Proverbs and see how we are meant to seek after wisdom and apply her to our lives. Wisdom is something we're meant to be enthusiastic. But if that's too abstract a concept, just look at this idea of loving God and loving neighbour. And if you ask those questions that we started with, this idea of, do we stand on grace and do we stand for grace, they're met by that idea. And it's not a complicated idea, right? We can understand that. This is what I need to do. But man, is it a difficult one to implement, isn't it? We need to keep asking those questions. Does my life stand on the grace of God? Does it stand for the grace of God? As we close, I just want to return to that idea of flood once again. When we experience loss or hurt, when floods come, we have an opportunity, don't we? We often describe these moments as silver linings. In these moments, we often get a moment of clarity of what is most important. When we're called to rebuild our lives after these losses, we can direct ourselves to do it in a solid way. But I want you to be careful in doing this too, because we do need to grieve. We do need to accept loss. We do need to experience hurt. Don't dull the pain or numb it ever. You may not want it, but in the long run, it's the only way through it, and it's the only way we can begin to healthily rebuild. But we need to ask that question when our hearts and head is strong enough. How am I rebuilding my lives? I lived a fairly flood-free existence most of the time, which is a whole other story and a whole other blog post or whatever. But a while ago, I had a romantic relationship that ended after nearly over a decade of being together. In that moment, a lot of my life, or what I thought my life was, washed away. Now, there was the obvious heartbreak and pain of breaking up with someone you love, but also the idea of marriage, the ideas of family, of future plans, of seeing that person again, of friendship, just gone. Like with one conversation, just disappeared. Over a decade, 11 years I think it was, just gone through the course of one difficult conversation. Now, with the help of counselling and the help of God, I started to ask that question of what was important in my life. Now that so much of it had been washed away, what was important? What was foundational and fundamental? Now, I had to ask a number of questions, but at its core, that idea of, do I stand on God's grace? Do I rely on his mercy and love? Was a crucial one. And then I had to ask my questions about how I related to people, because I couldn't relate to the person I cared for most. And I had to ask, do I stand for grace and mercy and love in the lives of other people? So I began looking at a firm foundation. And it's weird, as I started to rebuild this idea of romance, of family, of all these things that are associated with being in love, actually have not returned to the rebuilding structure. But a firm foundation is where I began. A new life and new structures emerged. Meaningful life came from asking the important questions of what was at the foundation of my life. And it was because a flood had come. Who was my rock? Who was my fortress? Who was the basis on which I built? Who was the person that I would dig deep into? In this season of flood, we can ask ourselves the question of how we build our house. Do we stand on the promises and grace of God? Do we stand for the promises of the grace of God? Let me just pray. Dear Jesus, we thank you that you guide us to where to build. That we need to look to you and your grace and your love so that we can stand tall and stand firm. And in standing firm, Lord, acknowledge that we are people who need to stand up to a world that doesn't want to love or provide mercy or grace or forgiveness. Lord, help us to be people who examine our lives honestly, to strip back things that need to be stripped back before a flood comes and washes them away. And Lord, we just want to be reminded as we ask those questions that you are with us always. You are with us always. Make that our reality, not just in some abstract way, but in our hearts and our heads. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. All of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And is our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in His eyes. Grace is an ocean we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest. And I don't have the time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way that He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Yeah, He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Yeah, He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He and we are His portion, and He's our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in His eyes. Grace is an ocean we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest. I don't have the time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way that He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Yeah, He loves us. Oh, how 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 He loves. And oh, how He loves us all. Oh, how He loves us. How He loves us all. Once more. And oh, how He loves us all.